Golden View Podcast Facebook Lives, and we're streaming live to YouTube. And I just want to introduce the show before we get to my guest, Giulio Caravatta. A couple things for everybody here, starting off with the Facebook link for our podcast, which is facebook.com/Golden View Podcast. Check us out on Buzzsprout, buzzsprout.com/1869778. And I also want to make your attention to Podcast Solutions Made Simple and our friend Carl Richards and the Podcast Alliance. And now I'm going to bring in Giulio. Giulio, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. So
good.
Let's just dive right in here because we don't have a lot of time, and we've seen 2 weeks of CFL football now. We've seen the BC Lions play 2 games. We saw the loss against the Argos. We saw the win against the Calgary Stampeders on Saturday. If you were there and I wasn't there, I PVR'd the game. So let's just dive right into some stuff that I picked up from game 2.
Sure.
This thing about missing converts, I know we talked about that off the air prior to starting. There's one against Toronto and there's 2 against Calgary. How concerning is that for you? It seems like it's one of those things, right?
Yeah, it is concerning because I think at one point I mentioned that, the game would have had a little bit different feel to it towards the end had, you convert those 2, right? Like anytime you miss an extra point, it's almost one of those things that always kind of rears its head late in the game like that. So, it is concerning. I did talk to Steph Flintoff, the Lions punter, and he holds on, I know that the one that was in Toronto, that had more to do, I think, with the ball than it did anything else. Apparently the ball was really slick and it just went through his hands, and that happens. But the blocks are concerning, right? Like, so what it tells me that, and the advantage that you have nowadays is that whenever this stuff kind of happens in game, your hope is that because the technology and the team's ability to have an iPad on the sidelines, you can take a look at it right away and figure out, hey, what did we do wrong? What's happening and what's causing the block? So for it to happen twice, that's concerning. So I'm sure it's something that Mike Benavides and they're going to take a good hard look at, because as you said, it's something that once it's happened to you, teams are going to try to exploit that, right? And they're going to try to do the same. So I would think that at some point here in the next, obviously this next week coming up, that they're going to work on that, because that is something that, Mike O'Shea and his coaching staff are going to obviously take a look at.
Yeah, and it's one of those things too, I think, Giulio, when you look back at that game in the first 3 quarters transpired, and I have some stats in front of me, but I was watching the TV this morning, so I was being kind of cheeky, taking screenshots of the television. So hopefully I can share them on the air, right? Now I'm going to put this one up if we all can see it, and we should be able to as the
question. I'm going to be able to see it.
Yeah. Okay. Can you see it?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, great. Okay. So I know it's a bit crude. I can try and find it online, but look at that first quarter. What does that tell you? Because I see 3 first downs, right? I see a big kickoff. I see the whole 50 Cent thing, the concert, the sold out crowd. And you see the start in Toronto and the first half, and you see that 20-6 start. And then you see this, and I'll flash it to the third quarter as well, because that was a bit concerning in terms of possession time. What are you, as a former CFL player and quarterback and analyst, thinking about a first quarter like that?
Well, in their defense, I think one of the things about, each and every game, and I talk to Vernon about this all the time, is, because of his ability to kind of move around, like, what do you expect defensively from a team? What do you think they're going to do to try to slow you down or slow the offense down? And, he says, over his career, he's seen pretty much every adjustment that you can make to try to combat him. But I think what caught them a little bit off guard, and I think Rick Campbell said it to us after the game as well, that they weren't expecting as much pressure as they got early on. And Calgary, they basically said, hey, listen, you're going to start a guy at center and Tyler Packer who has never started before. and Chris Slugger is going to start at left guard, they were going to say, "Listen, we're going to blitz on every play," and they did. They brought one more than the Lions had to protect. So that is something I think early on caught them off guard. And I think that was the result. Like those first 3 2-and-outs were, that was the cause of it. So, I mean, football, especially at this level, it's quite a chess match, right? You're dealing with, you're trying to figure out what they're going to do and try to guess what they do. And guessing is not the right word, because they watch so much film. They break down so much film. They have tendencies of the defensive coordinator, tendencies of defense in certain different areas of the field, what you're going to do, what you're going to try to do. And so I think for them, they were prepared for something that Calgary didn't do. And that's was come with the kind of pressure that they did. Yeah. But I thought overall, that they, were able to start to, move the ball a little bit better, the quick hitting screens, get the ball out of the quarterback's hand. I would have liked to have seen them maybe move the pocket a little bit more and try to get him out of the pocket. But they started to do that a little bit later on in the game as well. So, it's all part of that, like I say, punch, take a punch, you're going to deliver a blow. That all those kinds of things happen throughout a game that you just hope in the end that you're going to have, a little bit more answers than the other team. And that's what happened. Like, I know that the O-line took a lot of heat, and rightfully so for game one. They weren't good enough. They allowed too much pressure, but you also have to give them credit when they do well. And to play a team that blitzed as much as they did, and they didn't record a sack, tells me a lot, right? That tells me that they were able to, block up the most dangerous guys and leave a guy for the quarterback and let him try to get rid of the football, because that's essentially what you're doing. When you bring one more, then the offense can protect. So, for example, you have 5 offensive linemen, you have a running back. That's 6 guys. You're now bringing 7 because you're bringing one more. And that guy's responsibility is the quarterback. The quarterback now, that's his responsibility. Like that's what we say is he now has to find the hot receiver, because there is no one to block him. So he has to get rid of the ball quickly, or you're hoping, and it happened a couple of times where he makes that guy miss, and now he's out into the open field. So I thought they started to do a better job of that as well. So, it's not easy sometimes when you're having to make those kinds of adjustments as the game goes on. But I thought that Simic and that offense, did a good job. That was a tough, hard-nosed football game, back and forth. And the Lions found a way to get a win, which is what you ultimately, want.
Yeah, and that's what I thought too, having watched the whole game and watched the Toronto game. I think you're right. To go from 6 sacks to 0 is, I don't want to say extreme. I mean, it seems extreme to me, right? It's like, even if they had 2 or 3 sacks, you're like, okay, well, there's improvement on the table. They got absolutely destroyed that offensive line in the first game. Yeah. And then you have to think, and I want your thoughts on this, you're only 2 games into the season with 16 games to go. Yeah. So you see, so I'm finding these little details and we're talking about it, but then you're seeing how much is on the horizon. And Winnipeg this week is only game 3 out of 18.
Yeah. Yeah. It's still very early, but at the same time, now having said that, right? Like, even though it's, everybody's 2 games in, I'm sure that the Saskatchewan Roughriders wouldn't want to switch with the Edmonton Elk, right? No. And if you get out the gate like Winnipeg's 0-2, yeah, it's still early. But now, like, from a psychological standpoint, you're already fighting uphill, because you've got to make up, and especially I think in the West, where it's going to come down to it. These games, even though they're early on, you got to find a way to win them, right? Like it's the alternative is not going to be good, because then you're swimming uphill. You're trying to catch up, and that's not a good place to be, right? So this game is going to be obviously going to be huge for both these teams. Clearly Winnipeg does not want to go 0-3, and the Lions don't want to go 1-2. So, it's a big deal. And so it's going to be, I think, going to be a very entertaining football game, because even though we're only in week 3, there is a little bit of, not desperate.
Yeah, I know. No, I know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, of all the teams for it to be this early in the season at 0-2, it's Winnipeg.
Yeah.
And like, I don't have to tell you this. And I was thinking of some show notes before the thing. And I was like, the last 2 Western finals, like watching those games and what happened in those 2 games, and the fact that all roads lead through Winnipeg based on those 2 games.
Yeah.
And then Milt Stegall on the TSN broadcast picks BC to win the Grey Cup. There's the pressure to host of hosting the Grey Cup, all the stuff that's gone on around those events that you and I talked at even before we got to the CFL season starting, right?
Yeah.
So this has the potential to be huge. And it's one of the things I want to discuss with you a little bit. How do you approach Winnipeg in week 3?
Well, I'm going to tell you right now how I approach it. And this is, I was actually talking to Moj about this, is that, a lot of talk is going to be, Winnipeg's 0-2. They're going to come out flying at home and blah, 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 blah. Well, you know what? The mentality that you have to have if you're the BC Lions, or if you're anybody that's going in there, if you want, you got to have a championships mentality or championship team mentality, that you don't worry about Winnipeg being 0-2. You don't worry about what the other side is doing or what potentially they could be doing. You got to worry about your own business. And what I mean by that as well is this: the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, when they were, 3 years ago or 2 years ago, when they were, even last year, when they were at the height of their game, and they were as dominant as they've been, especially at home, do you think that they thought to themselves, oh, the BC Lions are coming into town, they're 0-2, they're going to be really hungry? You don't think like that. You can't think like that. You can't. You have to have a winner's mentality. And I remember just, thinking back from when I played, and the Calgary Stampeders were as dominant as they were in the mid-90s there.
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think the Stampeders and Wally Buono were worried about you when they came into town, or worried about
I don't get that.
They don't get that. You've got to have the mentality that you're gonna win. You're gonna win every game. And it's not what they do, it's what you do. You control what you do. It's your mentality. So, I think that the Lions, their team, they're a good road team. They got really good veteran leadership. Yeah. And I think you're going to see it, they owe this team. And I think that's got to be one of those things that don't talk yourself into, they're going to be, they're going to be desperate. They're going to be this, they're going to be that. Don't worry about what they do. Yeah. You just worry about what you do and take care of business.
Yeah. And that's it. I've got some other notes here too. And I wanted to do a couple more things. We mentioned the thing with Milt Stegall in the preview. Another thing I'm seeing a lot on Twitter and watching those first couple of games is Vernon Adams on short yardage plays. I'm really curious your thoughts on that. Former quarterback yourself. I mean, that's a really interesting development, right?
What's interesting about that is that how the game has evolved into now you have a third down or a third string quarterback usually who's a 3rd and 1 specialist.
Exactly.
When did that happen? As far as Vernon doing the third downs, I don't like the idea of him taking unnecessary shots.
Well, that's what a lot of people said, right?
Yeah.
That's what I think too.
That's a concern you always have, your quarterback taking shots. You don't want him to take unnecessary shots.
Right.
So, it'll be interesting to see how this part of their game evolves. Like, do they continue to work with Vernon at as the third down quarterback, or does Jake Dolegala start to take more of a role? Does Chase Bryce start to take more of a role? I think that situation is fluid. I think that there could be potential change if, in a game you're you start seeing your quarterback taking shots that you're going, geez, I'm not doing this no more. So, but at the same time, it's usually 1 yard. and it's not just happening to BC. I've watched every game. There are a lot of 3rd down and 1 scenarios now that teams, it's not easy. It's not like, you got, every team is no problem, or they're getting, it's, there's a few teams that have blown up on 3rd and 1 as well. And so it's, it's something that everyone has to worry about. But I think in the Lions case, because Vernon's the one doing it, he's the starter, there's more eyes on that because of that situation.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting one. It kind of leads into one of my next, got a couple more questions. And I have another screenshot. I'm sure you're able to see it, but like the change in roster in the offseason is something that you just can't, I don't want to say I can't get past it. It's not meant to distract from our conversation, but it begs the question. And, I watched the Arrow Up video that the Lions produced. And one of the things I pulled out, and I was watching them on Saturday, was the fact that they had Marcus Sales, and Marcus Sales was signed and then cut, right? And they kept this young guy, Ronald Kent Jr. What do you know about Ronald Kent Jr.? Because I'm really curious, because Kent was clearly shocked in the Arrow Up video. I can share the link later on when I post the show, that Sales had been cut. And so, we know about guys like David Menard. We know about Matthew Betts. And I laughed that Matthew Betts was in the audience the other day for the game against Toronto. I thought that was kind of like, I'm like, oh, there's Matthew Betts on the sidelines watching his former team. So give me a little bit on this guy, Ronald Kent Jr. Like, what does he bring? Because there's something about him. There's just something.
Well, here's the thing. Obviously when I go to training camp, like I was there for a week this year, I go every year for a week. You start to watch, obviously, practice, and my first conversations are usually with Neil McAvoy, Ryan McMaden.
Yeah, of course.
I talk to Rob Ralph, who's the director of Canadian Scouting, first. And I say, hey, you guys have been up here for 10 days already. Who do you like? And what's been happening? Yeah. Because really, training camp, the reality is that most guys are going to jump out at you right away. And then when they do, that's going to give you way more leeway in training camp. You're going to see a little bit more action because you're really kind of making that first impression. Ronald Kent Jr. And the other part of that is I talk to those guys, but then I talk to the players,
of course,
and I talk to the veteran players,
of course,
because you don't fool the players. The players know.
Yeah.
And so Ronald Kent would be one of them. Jordan Perryman would be another one. Ace Ely would be another one. These guys, they jumped out at training camp. I get the impression with Ronald Kent that the longer that he's on that active roster and playing, they're going to have a tough time taking him off. I like him. And, everyone, he played his first pro game.
Right. Well, exactly.
And sure, he had a PI, and I get that, but you got to look at the big picture. And the big picture is this. You become a successful organization every year by bringing in new talent.
Yeah.
You have to. You cannot survive by just going out and signing free agents and trying to fix a problem with somebody who becomes a free agent and overpay for them. You need to find new talent. That's the bottom line. And I think the Lions and Ryan McMaden and his staff, the U.S. scouting staff, and Rob Ralph on the Canadian side, they've done an excellent job. And then the other part of that is you have to believe in what you see and what you are being paid to do. As a general manager, you're being paid to go out and find talent. When you see it and you watch it, you got to believe it and then have the guts to say, we're going this way because I believe this guy's going to be better than this guy. Because ultimately, that's the Wally Buono line. He used that every year in training camp. My job as a general manager is to find someone better than you. Because if it's between me and you, like keeping my job and keeping I'm going to pick me every time. So I'm not going to get friendly.
No, I know.
It's my job to find the talent. And then you also have to trust what you see, right? So that is like Ronald Kent is a perfect example. Jordan Perryman's a perfect example.
Right.
Christophe Beaulieu is a perfect example.
I have him on my list too, and I have Travis Fulgham on my list too.
And Travis Fulgham is another one, right? Like
right.
You have to believe in what you see, and then the part that we get frustrated with, I think, for a lot of people, is that want instant satisfaction. They want it.
No.
They want success right away. They want an interception. They want touchdown.
Never happens. Never happens.
You got to let them. You got to get
happen.
Right. It's a process.
No, it doesn't, because it's funny that you bring up Wally too, because I was thinking back we're just going to wrap it up. I was thinking back to the 2019 season and what that was like as a season ticket holder, right? Mm-hmm. And how rough that was. Whether Claybrooks was at fault for that one season, and he was gone as a coach, and then no season in 2020, and the last season of Mike Riley in 2021. Then we start fresh in 2022 with Nathan Rourke. And it's funny that you bring up Wally, because I was thinking back 5-10 years ago, how it was the last Grey Cup win, and then Wally was here, and you get to about 2018, it's his last season as head coach, and you kind of felt like had Wally kind of lost his touch, and then you bring that up, and you think the new regime has taken that sort of torch that had the same attitude that
Neil McAvoy learned under Wally, right? So
that's right.
He understands that. And the other part is Rick Campbell, who has he's the co-general manager. He's going to have a lot of personnel too. This ain't Rick's first rodeo. He's been around this game a long time. And it's just part of the progression that you need to, and I think in years past, like before this regime, the tendency was try to find a free agent to fix the problem, as opposed to developing and finding new talent. And that's what excites me about, this regime. And obviously I talk to them a lot, but
of course you do.
What I appreciate is that, the personnel guys are going out and doing their job. They bring the talent in, and then the coaches are taking it, and they're working with it on a day-to-day basis. But everyone's being trusted to do their job, right? They're you don't have like the coaches second guessing the personnel guys and all that. They get together. They know what kind of players that they want, where at what position, what kind of athleticism and traits do you want in these certain spots, and they go out and find those guys. And then when you find them, you got to believe that you've got that guy. Yeah. And so I for me, that's the key to great success and continued success, is that when you're not afraid to let someone go, as in Marcus Sales' case, because you think you have someone better. And it's I love Marcus Sales. Marcus Sales is one of the nicest guys, and he's a very good football player. And he was great. He didn't end up on the street for very long.
No, I mean, Saskatchewan picked him up, but still, they still cut him to take Kent Jr.
Yeah, but
that's crazy.
When you have guys that can play, then believe it, play them, and live through maybe a few of the mistakes that you hope will be limited and don't cost you, because they're going to be mistakes. But you hope that they learn fast and are able to, adjust. And I think Ronald Kent, I had one of the veteran players on that defense say that when Ronald Kent gets on the field, they're going to have a tough time bringing him off. And so that to me tells me that the players really believe in him, and they see it every day, not only on what he does on the practice field, but what he does in preparation for games and how he gets himself ready. He clearly has made a very, very strong impression.
Yeah. All right, let's wrap it up there. But one thing I did like to see, this is a sentimental bit for me. This is my last question. This whole thing about, well, not this whole thing, the fact that BC Lions football is back on CKNW. And I'd love to see that. Yes. And I remember hearing an interview with you quite a few years ago where you talked about the influence of a guy like J. Paul McConnell on your career. Yes. Something quick on that, because I know who J. Paul is. I mean, I listened to him on the radio. I remember him on CBC TV doing sports. To me, that's a huge coup.
Well, here's the thing. I'll tell you, like, I owe everything to JP.
Yeah.
Everything that I have in on this side of football, when I became a broadcaster in 1999 and took over the job, everything I owe to him. He was not only he believed in me and he took a chance on me, but he taught me how to be a pro and what it took. And the biggest thing that JP taught me was about being prepared. And you know, do your job, know what you're talking about. Make sure that you're talking to the right people. And that's what I still try to do. And I've been very, very lucky over the years, because not only working with JP McConnell, but then I got a chance to work with Rick Ball, and then I had a chance to work with Scott Rintoul, and now I work with the Moj. You mean they're all pros, right? Like they all know how to do their job, and it's a lot of fun when you share a passion, like you share a passion of football in my case, and the people that you work with also share that passion, because you know we spend countless hours talking about football and everything around football, and it's just really, I really do feel as I get older, I really appreciate the joy that it brings me, because of, you know, I get that opportunity to watch football and be able to go out and do it once a week on air and CKNW, and hopefully bring a smile to people's faces, and maybe they learn something new that I can bring to the table. That's my hope. But getting back to your original point about JP, you know, I mean, that he's an institution. He's a guy that, again, that one thing about him, he had such a passion for the game and for the league, and it's something that he instilled in me, and I hopefully, as I move on in my career, I've instilled in other people, because you got to have the passion, you got to love it, because if you don't, it's not going to be good.
All right, let's wrap it up there. Thanks, Giulio. I really appreciate you doing this.
No problem.
Just going to throw a couple links out here. Facebook.com/Golden V podcast is our Facebook page. Golden V podcast.ca is our website. Buzzsprout.com/1869778 is the place where you can find all the episodes of our podcast, including this podcast, which I'll be posting tomorrow. Going to wrap it up there and say thanks to Giulio. Talk to everyone.